To another super basic tutorial. In this, we're going to take several of the elements that we've learned and put them together into one, what's called a composite image. So we're going to make a scene for a movie. Let's start with a road. So I like this particular road. I just did a Google search for road. I'm going to click view image, copy image, and we'll head over to Photoshop. Now, because it's going to be for video, this time we're going to set our setting to film and video. And I want it to be full HD, which is 1080p. So we'll say OK. Here's my new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and paste in my new road. Now, transform, which is Command T, will allow us to move this around on screen and resize it. So I want to set the road up so it's pretty much dead center. Alright, now, I only want the road. We're building a composite scene here. It's kind of like sampling in music, so I don't want to use any of these other elements of this. So what I'm going to do is grab my selection tool and just make a quick selection of this part of the road until it gets to that first dip in the hill. Now I'll click my create mask button, and here we go. That has shrunk that down to just the road for me, and I'll need to clean this up later, but we'll just start there. So we'll hop back over to Chrome, and I want a field now. So I'm going to do a search for field. And I'm happy with this field right here, so we'll just grab that, copy image, head back over to Photoshop. We're going to paste it in place and put it below our road layer. So now I'll bring it up until the horizon line of the field matches the horizon line of the road layer, which should be about here. Now, I'm going to go back to the road layer and transform it and rotate it just a little bit so that the horizon line lines up with that field, like so. And now you'll notice that I've created some issues around the edges, and I can fix those by just scaling up this whole image. So I'm going to hold Option and Shift and drag out on that, and that'll allow me to scale from all directions at the same time. So there we go. There's our basic road setup. Now, I don't like this plain sky, so I'm gonna click on this field layer, and we're gonna make a selection of the sky. We're gonna create a new mask, but this time, because I made the selection of the sky, I accidentally masked out the grass, so we need to invert that. So all I need to do is click on this mask right here on the field and hit Command I. That'll invert the mask. So there you go. Now we have our grass, we have our road, but there's no sky. So let's go back over to here, and we're going to type in scary sky. I like this one. So I'm going to click view image. I'm going to copy that. Head back over to Photoshop, paste it, and make sure that it is below the field layer. Now with my arrow tool selected, I'm going to drag this until the horizon line matches up with the horizon line of our other image here. Okay, and one last image I'm going to add in before we get into color correction is going to be a tree. So I went back over to Google. I did a search for a tree. I found this tree, which I rather like. So I'll copy it, come back over, paste it, and now we're going to scale it down and place it somewhere about here in our image. Now, we need to get rid of the white in this tree. There are many different ways to do this. We could do this with the selection tool, but see how there's little bits of white inside of everywhere? We're going to use a different tool, which is inside of our layer effects. So let's go ahead and do that. I want this tree on the top, by the way. So I'm going to double click in the blank area to the right of the layer. And this will bring up our layer effects. This is where we can add things like drop shadows, a bunch of other stuff. But what I'm interested in is the blend if. Blend if gray. So here's how this works. This layer, if I drag down this, anything that's white starts to disappear. Now, this will look pretty harsh in most cases, So we need to split these two in order to create a feather. So if I hold down the Option key and then continue to drag, this will create a nice feathering effect. So as you can see, the tree in the background is starting to blend a little bit better into our image. Alright, so now we need to get into color correction. We've got some crazy stuff going on with different exposures in this image. For one, the grass is way brighter than the road and the sky. So let's start off by doing a levels correction on this. I'm going to go up to my adjustment layers, which is this little symbol here. We're going to grab levels, and as we've done in the past, we'll hold down Option and click between these two layers in order to link the levels just to that layer. So here's our levels. Basically the way this works, this is all of our shadows, this is all of our highlights. If I start dragging up my shadows, the whole scene's going to get darker, okay? So now that grass just about matches the road. So I'll leave that be like that, and now we need to match the tree. So we'll do the same thing. Create another levels, hold down Option, we'll link the levels to this layer, and we'll start dragging down the darkness until it matches our scene a little bit better. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a lens flare that brings the sun and creates some sort of a light distortion that comes through the whole image. So what we'll do is we'll create a new layer on top, and we need to paint this layer with the bucket tool completely black. Then we'll set this layer to screen, which makes the black invisible. I know that seems a little silly to do, but here's what happens next. We're going to go to Filter, Render, Lens Flare, and we're going to put that right in the middle of the screen. And we'll say OK. And you might want to like play with the brightness. Maybe we'll bring the brightness up a little. Say OK, and here's our new lens flare. Now the reason why we had to do that is the lens flare filter has to be written onto an image. So we chose a black image so we could just make the black transparent and we would get this effect. So I am going to move this so it is exactly in the sun, and then Command T to scale it up so it covers the whole image. And I'll hit return. And I just want to blur this a little bit, so we'll go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we'll crank this up until the rings start to disappear. Okay. So now just a couple more effects will tie this all together. So let's go and add a new levels adjustment to the whole project this time. I'm not going to just select one layer. And you'll notice as we bring down the shadows, it sort of ties everything together. Also in doing so, I've realized I've still got some issues with my tree, some little white edging going on. So I'm going to go back to that tree layer, open up those properties, and we're just going to drop down the white slider until those are fixed. So there we go. Here's a basic composition of several different layers that we've added in. Now remember, stacking of layers is really important because what's on top we see first. So the lens flare needs to be above everything else. For example, if I move the lens flare below the tree, it won't look natural. So we've stacked this up so that the sky's on the very bottom. I just messed that up here. Hold on, let me fix that. So the sky's on the very bottom. We have our field. Then we have our sky. Not our sky, I'm sorry, our road. And then we have our tree. And then above that, we have our lens flare that's helping to tie everything together. Now, this is a nice composite that we could then bring into Final Cut and animate if we wanted to. Alright, there's another basic tutorial for you.